What's going on, everybody? On this week's episode, I have a very special guest. He is my former neighbor. So, background is that I used to be a state trooper, and my neighbor had the biggest and nicest house in the block. And naturally, I was curious about what he did. So, one day he had asked me if I wanted to go snowmobiling, and I took him up on it. And I was like, look, man, I'm not asking this as a cop, just very curious. What do you do? And is it legal? He has a really nice house, but you would not know that Kevin is wealthy if you met him on the street. Drives a regular truck, wears regular jeans, doesn't post clickbait. In fact, he's not even on the internet. Yet he has 650 rentals, and he started his real estate career in 2004. He started with nothing. He bought a duplex. It was condemned. It was disgusting. And he basically just renovated one unit, shovel by shovel, built up to 650 units. He rarely sells anything. And it's just so important for me to talk about why I became a partner of his. He really opened my eyes to what was real. He really opened my eyes to what was possible in real estate, but also he has very similar values that I have or aspire to have, and that is, I've asked him before. First of all, he's a snowmobiling junkie, and so we would go snowmobiling we would leave the house at like midnight. And I remember calling Kevin and saying, hey, look, got off early, wondering if you want to hit the trails around 5 p.m. That way we don't have to stay out until 4 in the morning. Police officers work crazy hours. And he was like, no, that's when I eat dinner with my family. So despite his love for snowmobiling, and he is a junkie, let me tell you, he is a family man at heart. And that's kind of my vision. Is I don't want to be known as this guy on Instagram posting pictures of fancy cars. I want to be the guy that is wealthy, both has a nice house, certainly, but also has family values and just an incredible guy. So I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. We talk a lot about not selling. We talk about how to get started. We talk about why development and how things have changed throughout his time. Obviously, he's been through a lot of recessions and downturns since 2004. So we talk about how to weather the storm, how so much has changed. And I'm really just excited to get him on the podcast. So without further ado, let's jump into the pod. All right. So I just went over the bio here, and super impressive guy. Obviously, we met, we were neighbors, and you're a snowmobile junkie. And we were always out there snowmobiling, but I told the story about when I called you at 5:30 p.m. and I wanted to go out on the trails, and you were basically like, look, this is the time that I spend with my family, so let's continue to go out at 10. So I want to pass the torch over to you. Your bio is impressive, 650 units starting in the year 2000, but tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. I mean, I kind of jump in, I guess, where I got started. So in high school, didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was more of a trades type high school. So I took welding and really kind of fell in love with that. Got out of school, started doing that, got my degree in welding engineering. And one day I'm on the job training a guy how to weld, and he's telling me he's going to be retired in a few years or whatever. And I was like, no way, how you doing that? And he said real estate. So I immediately hooked, and I figured out what I want to do with the rest of my life. So from there, kind of looked into it and winded up buying a foreclosed duplex for 32 grand. That was just trashed. And but we moved right in and fixed up the other side first, got it rented out, and found that the rent from the other side was more than my mortgage and all my utilities. So essentially was living for free. So that kind of got me hooked. And from there, just kind of grew it into, a whole bunch of different diversified things.
That's incredible. So when was your first big deal, you would say? Like, how do you get to buying a 25 unit or a 13 unit? Because a lot of people, they want to get started, and a duplex is certainly a great way to start. It's a great way. It's a popular term everyone calls house hacking, where you essentially buy a duplex or a fourplex and you live for free. But for somebody who's listening to your bio, rolling their eyes, like 650 units, how do you get to that scaling point, or how did you build up the cash flow or the cash to even go out and buy these bigger deals?
it takes a long time. I mean, I started in 2000. Real estate's not a get rich quick thing. It takes time. So, we bought that first duplex, and shortly after, I had found a 5 unit property that was on the market. But walking through it, there was room to add 2 units to it. So I was always looking for deals that I could add value to, and I guess I learned that early on. And and we bought that and added the 2 units to it, and turned out to be a 7 unit property. But then it was early on, and I remember I had made a bet with a friend of mine, and it was a race to get to 200 units. And I might have had, I don't know, 15 at the time. He was a little bit ahead of me, might have had 20 or so. And we took different strategies, different approaches. And he was looking at trying to go as a newbie and buy large apartment complexes. He's looking at a 150 unit complex, 200 unit complex. And meanwhile, I was just picking off these 3 units, 4 units, 6 units, um, and just kind of went from there and grew it. And after about 8 years, he had wind up selling a couple of the units he had started with, and really kind of went behind, and I was well over 200 units at that point. So I didn't just try to scale and buy the 200 units. I think there's a lot of advice out there. Oh, don't waste your time on the small stuff, just go after the big stuff. And when you're negotiating on a large property, and people ask you what you're doing, you're like, oh, I'm doing this part time on the side of my day job. No one will take you seriously. But if you've got 5-10 years under your belt of buying and accumulating these smaller assets and building your cash flow, you get that credibility, and you kind of learn your struggles on the smaller stuff, where your mistakes aren't as detrimental as if you made a mistake on a 200 unit apartment complex.
Yeah, that's great. And I believe you did some house flipping too. So what would you say to the people that are, single family is a waste of time, or I just want to go do the big deals? Like, you use single family flipping, like house flipping, in your construction background to fund these multifamily deals. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I did, yeah. So when I first started, I had the full time job in 2000, and then I was able to finally get out of that in 2004, and have been focused strictly on real estate since then. But even when I quit my job, I didn't have enough cash flow from my multifamilies to support our living expenses. So I, kind of took a two-tier approach and said, okay, well, I'm gonna, try to do a bunch of different things in real estate, and buying single-family houses to flip and buying multifamily houses was was the way to go. Because what would happen would be, the multifamilies, when I bought them, I never intended to sell them. That was just going to keep building. That was going to be my cash flow to sustain my lifestyle. And flipping the single family houses really gave me the cash to be able to buy the multifamilies, kind of. But I was also living off of the cash from the flips while waiting for the cash flow from the multifamilies to pick up. So, they kind of worked well hand in hand. On top of that, with the multifamilies, to kind of grow that portfolio, I was borrowing hard money for the acquisition as well as the redevelopment of it. And then once I get the thing stabilized, I'd refinance it. But at the time, and there might be still some banks doing it out there, when I would go to refinance, there wasn't really a seasoning issue. So I could be done my construction in 6-8 months, have the thing leased up. And then when I went to go refinance it, they would give me cash at 80% of the value. It didn't matter what I had into it. So on some of those deals, I'd walk away with 100 grand in cash on the refinance. And the nice thing is I could spend every dime of that because it wasn't taxed as capital gains like the sale of the single family homes was. So, and I was building, some depreciation and things like that to offset the capital gains tax on the single family home flips. So for a long time, as I was starting to grow it, I was getting spendable cash and new equity to be able to put into properties. but I was doing it in such a way where the tax burden wasn't that strong because of the depreciation and the refinance and the deductions from the interest on the loans. So it really offset the income from the single families.
That's incredible. That's like the Burr model that people talk about, where you buy really low, it's condemned, you rehab it, and then you refinance it, rent it, and repeat. So the whole strategy is you actually make money by forcing appreciation through the construction process or whatever the value add component is. But the biggest thing I think that you said there was that not only did you walk away with money, but you got to keep your property. And there's a lot of people that, you know this because we got into the syndication space and we saw a lot of people go up and we saw a lot of people come down, and people are talking about, you know, I own 200 units, like your friend in the goal is like, I own 200 units, but really I tell people like, yeah, you okay, you do, and that's great, but you have to sell it in 3 years or in 2 years because your investor capital, your investor base is expecting that capital back, and you can't refinance because your investor needs their money back. They invested with you to get their money back. So it's a really interesting strategy. And I know you started in the year 2000, but how have you held on to so much of your properties? I mean, you talked a little bit about it, but your multifamily mindset was like, anything multifamily, I'm going to buy and hold forever, or what was your strategy going in? Because a lot of people look at their equity at some point. COVID was a huge bull run and people are just like, I'm going to sell, we're at the top. And I think people don't recognize it's like, if you sell at the top, you got to go buy something at the top or pay a ton of taxes. So how do you have afforded to hold on to all your properties is the question.
Yeah, well, a lot of the syndication deals, to your point, they're underwritten to have to sell in 3 years, or they're going to be facing a pretty tough challenge because there's just not enough cash flow to support the debt. So they have to sell it at, whatever they can get in order to get out of it. So when I underwrote everything, it had to cash flow from day one. And well, I shouldn't say day one. It would have to cash flow after I got it to a point of stabilization, because everything that I bought was pretty much distressed type stuff. It was either physically distressed or managerial distressed or both. And, after I, either stabilized the management or did the physical stuff and stabilized it, then it cash flowed. And then I knew I would hold it long term. As an example, so we started doing this, and when I was financing it, it was with 20, 25-year notes. And, they cash flowed then. It was pretty tight. But as rents have increased, my mortgages stay the same. So the cash flow has increased year over year over year. And now we're at the tail end of paying those things off. So without refinancing, I just put a loan on it and continued to pay the thing for 20 years. And now we're at the expiration of a lot of those. So then the cash flows will go up even more. It's always tempting to take some chips off the table when the price goes up and wow, I can't believe it's worth this much. Well, when we started buying in some of our markets, I mean, we were buying obviously distressed, but anywhere from $5,000 a unit on the really distressed stuff to 25, 30 grand a unit was like the max that we would pay. And, I kind of thought, wow, if this ever increases in value to $50,000, I'm going to sell this stuff and get out. It'll never be worth over that. And then, it goes up and it's worth, 100,000 a unit. It's like, wow, there's no way it's going to go over that. Well, now things are trading for, over 100, 150,000 a unit, and even some of the tertiary markets that we're in. So again, it's tempting. And I did, trim back on some of our portfolio, around COVID when things did kind of go crazy. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take some chips off the table and kind of, strategize where we're managing our portfolio and stuff. And in doing that, I said, okay, well, I'm going to replace, this with, through the 1031 exchange process and buy something larger and keep on going. And I think we pulled out on maybe 4 different deals. We sold a campground. I sold, another few multifamily deals, and was able to place one, obviously, in the deal that we have together, Nick. And that was great. And I was able to defer the taxes on that. But on the other deals, I wasn't able to do that and got whacked with the capital gains because I wasn't able to find a replacement property that worked. Um, when we sold the campground, we had found a replacement manufactured housing community in Virginia, and we were set to move on it. And we stopped looking for for identifying other deals because this was the one. Everything worked out, and it turned out the syndicating partner on that deal wasn't able to get the deal closed. So wound up we lost at 1031 and had to pay the tax hit on it. So for those reasons, I'm just saying, I'm just going to hold on to it. I mean, my LTV in my portfolio has shrunk way down. Most of my payments are going towards principal now because it's over that threshold, and where all your interest is front loaded on your loans. Banks expect that you're going to refinance at some point, but if you don't and you just hold on to them, at the end you're paying all principal.
Yeah, that's incredible. A couple takeaways here. If you sell a high, you got to buy high, but you also have to go through the stress of replacing an asset, or you're going to pay a lot of taxes. But what would you say to somebody who says to you, look, you started in 2000, it was easy back then. It must be nice to have 650 units. You said that it's tight. It was tight. It was pretty tight when you got started as far as acquiring units, adding value, stabilizing it, and cash flowing and moving on to the next one. My question is, how tight was it when you got started, and how much do you think things have really changed since then?
So in 2000, you're right. I'm lucky. I started when I did. There's no doubt about that. But you know what? Back in 2000 when I was starting, I was talking to guys that started in the 80s saying, "Wow, you're lucky when you got started. It must have been so easy back then." So any generation can say that, and they'd be right. What was the other piece to that?
So it was really tight when you got started. Like,
Oh,
your deals with
right.
with cash flow. Like, I guess how tight was it, and how were you able to make deals? I know you bought distress, but
it was a time, I think. In the late 90s, there was kind of a recession, and there wasn't as much media out there about buy multifamily and things like that. I mean, there was a couple late night infomercials on educating people how to get into real estate. Carlton Schultz, I think that's his name. Carlton Sheets was his name, I think. And but it was pretty tight, but there wasn't as many people chasing it in the markets that we went in. So in the primary markets, so obviously I'm from New Hampshire, and the primary markets were, say, Manchester, Nashua, Concord. There was a lot of people going after assets in those, and I never felt I could compete in those markets because the returns I was looking for, I just couldn't get there. So I started looking in some of the more tertiary markets where I couldn't believe people were selling for what they were, because as soon as we leased it up, it's instantly cash flowing. It's like, why aren't more people going after this? And they weren't at the time, but now that dynamic has changed, so it's kind of tightened up. But that ebbs and flows. So from 2000 till 2005, 2006, I only knew a real estate market that went up. I never saw anything go down. And then 2007, 2008, that whole thing hit, and everything just crashed. I mean, the values of everything went down. So the single family home flipping before 2005, if you made a mistake and it took you an extra month longer to get a renovation done, you were paid for that mistake because the value was going up. Well, that paradigm shifted, and as the market started going down, we lost on quite a few single family home flips because when we underwrote how much we could sell it for, it was up here, but by the time we were able to sell it, the market had gone down even further than we expected, so we were chasing it down. All the while, though, our multifamily portfolio, maybe the values went way down. I couldn't sell them for what we had into them, but it didn't matter to me because I wasn't a seller, and the rents were still coming in. They were still cash flowing, and they actually probably started going up a little bit because people that were getting foreclosed on in their single family houses were moving to apartments. On top of that, developers weren't building anything anymore, so inventory was tightening up, vacancies were tightening up, and that was also helping with it. So when everyone says, the sky is falling and whatever, if you owned something or if you were buying, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I mean, I always say this too, is like equity is speculative and cash flow pays the bills, because you see, you talked a little bit about the infomercials back then. Well, the space is flooded now with people with nice hair and nice teeth and gurus and the course industry and TikTok and Instagram. There's so much advice out there and a lot of clickbait of like, I made $2 million in 60 days and this is how I did it. Well, if you actually read the fucking post, you'll see that they actually didn't sell and they're just saying it's worth that. Like it's equity. It'd be like me saying that your house is worth $60 million. If you truly believe that, then you can post about it. And that is cool, but it's not in your account. And that is certainly not going to help you to pay your bills. And that's what I really learned from you. I would say the biggest thing was like to focus on the stabilized cash flow more than anything else. You basically answered it, but I was going to say, how did you survive the hard times? And maybe give an example of, if you could think of a time where you got hit the hardest.
I got hit hardest probably in 2008. So we were in the middle of renovating a multifamily, and it was the biggest one I had done up to that point. It was not that big. I think there was 15 units residential in there, and then the first floor was commercial. It was a downtown property, and I had some lines of credit on some other multifamilies that I was using for the renovation, and I had a pretty good limit on my credit card, and that's what I was using to do the renovations. Well, all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail saying, due to the decrease in value of your properties, we are now freezing your line of credit. And then I get the same letters on my credit cards. So now I'm halfway through this renovation. I've got no more equity to finish renovating it, but I've got to get it done. And, I remember sitting down, me and my wife are looking at it and we're saying, okay, we owe the elevator guy $75,000. We owe this contractor, we added it all up, and it was like 300 grand and of, just construction debt that I had to pay off with no equity to do it. And, I was like, well, we're gonna dig in and we're gonna get ourselves out of this. And, so, I made deals with all the contractors. Hey, this happened. I mean, everyone was dealing with it at the time, so it wasn't unheard of. But I told them all, look, I'm not trying to walk away from my obligations. I'm going to get you paid. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it, but, I kind of laid out a plan and stuff. And everyone agreed with me. I never had to file bankruptcy. I never missed one mortgage payment, nothing like that. And by the end of the year, I was back and had all those people paid off. And I did it by doing single family flips at the same time as I was doing this multifamily. So I think to protect myself from those downturns, I really like diversification. And when I say that, I don't mean that I'm investing in the stock market and putting it in mutual funds and things like that. When I say diversification, it's all within the realm of real estate, but in different asset classes and in different markets. So, I'll have a mobile home park in one market. I'll have an affordable housing project that we developed through tax credits in another in another market, versus market rate housing, so all these different asset classes that we've kind of worked with has diversified because there's ups and downs, and when one is down, another is up. So they really balance themselves out. I mean, that's even true when when we experience vacancies in the different markets, it always ebbs and flows. It's never across the entire portfolio. We'll have, a higher vacancy rate, say in Claremont, 1 month, and Berlin is, say, fully leased up. And then a couple months later, we'll have a spike in vacancy in Berlin, but Claremont's 100% leased up. If we had all of our eggs in one market and one asset class, then you're at risk of any variation in that sector. So if you're diversified, then you kind of eliminate some of that.
That's really unique. I don't know really anyone else that does that. Most your big real estate guys that you see on, whether you know them personally or they're on Instagram or they're a guru on LinkedIn or wherever, they are teaching you how to invest in apartments, or they are teaching you how to invest in mobile home parks. But it's usually something very, very, very specific in one asset class, one industry. But you're saying, look, I like mobile home parks, I like campgrounds, I like apartments, commercial. You've even developed single family neighborhoods after the crash of '08 and done HOA exits, and you've developed affordable housing, apartment complexes, and right now we're working on like a hotel conversion deal. So do you ever think you'd be a lot more successful if you had just stuck to apartments?
There's I don't think I'm a genius, and when I set out, I didn't set out with the expectation of doing all these different things. Had I focused and dialed in on one thing, no, I don't think I'd be better off. I think for me, what I did worked out great because I went where the current was taking me, and I never really had a set plan. I obviously set goals. Everyone that's successful and done things has set goals. I mean, that's pretty standard. But I'm not afraid to change my goals, and I'm not afraid to explore other avenues and opportunities as they come up, and just see where they take me. That's kind of how I've diversified.
You've had really limited partners too, as far as you look at guys that have 650 units. Typically, they are syndicators, so they go a different route where they raise capital in the form of shares and they go to Wall Street or high net worth individuals. You've kind of swung the hammer, used your bank equity to fund future deals. What lessons have you learned doing that? And then I guess the same question is, do you think you'd be wealthier if you had just raised all of the money from one of your rich uncles?
Hard to say what I'd be like if I did something different. I only know what I did.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm just when I say that, I mean, I guess I'm speculating, and I don't expect you to say, oh, I wish I just stuck with mobile home parks. I guess a better way to frame the question is how did you really build this level of scale without using big time investors? Because I mean, you invested in a deal that we did in North Carolina. I would not. Nick Chapman had just left the state police, and I had just started a new journey within real estate, highly motivated by you, as you know. I would not have been able to fund that deal. It would have taken me years of single family flipping, but we had developed kind of a relationship and a trust. And I think I had taken some action and you saw something in me. And obviously it was great timing because you had been some capital to place and you were interested in diversifying into North Carolina and getting some exposure there. So why not just do your own deals? Why invest with me? Or I guess, back to the original question of using your own money.
Sure. And you kind of asked if I liked a certain asset class better than another one. Well, you've only got one kid right now, but once you have multiple kids and someone asks you, which one of your kids do you like better? You can't answer that. You love them all,
Right.
And that's kind of the way that I feel about it. As far as, partnerships, I have done deals with several different partners on several different things. Some of them have worked out absolutely great and others not so good. But I've always kind of wanted to keep, a certain thing that was just ours. And on another thing is I thought, if it was something I could do myself and somebody else wasn't bringing value to the table, why would I go look for another partner for that? So, especially as I was building and accumulating the twos, threes, sixes, 10 unit, properties, they were digestible by myself. So I didn't really need to bring in a partner on those deals. And like I said, the way that we funded them was by borrowing hard money for acquisition and hard money for the construction. So I couldn't have done it without private lenders. But that was, I guess you could say, my partner. But it was a lending relationship, not a ownership partnership. And that worked well. And I've always said, okay, well, I see how much these guys are making, because I was paying 15-16% interest with 2, 3, 4 points sometimes on some of that stuff. As I built the relationships, I was able to get that down, but it was a lot. And I always said, I want to be on that side of the table. How do I lend out money? And you can do it if you got a pile of cash in the bank. You can lend it out. And we do some of that, but the bulk of where we've lent money out is, one of the problems is you own these multifamilies and you start to pay down the debt. And as I said, I haven't refinanced because I like the fact that I've already paid the bulk of my interest. But now I've got these properties with all this equity in them. What do I do with it? So what I've been able to do is leverage that by getting a line of credit in the second position, obviously a lower LTV, but a line of credit in second position on these properties. And then that's the money that I use to lend out. So it's kind of an arbitrage type situation where I'm borrowing it from my line of credit at X percentage, and then I'm lending it out at a higher price. So it's an arbitrage. It's a way to use some of your equity, and it allows me to help people out in the way that I was helped when I got started, because I couldn't have done it without that source of funding.
Yes, yeah, that's really important. Like you have a ton of access, like you have access to capital, but you don't have to actually sit on $3 million. And I think that sitting on $3 million is, with inflation and with bank accounts, will give you, obviously everyone's goal is to build wealth. So I'm going to read a quote here. Cash is trash. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't leave a lot of cash sitting idle. No way.
Okay.
I put that to work.
So you're trying to leverage your money into appreciating assets, or lend your money where you're getting interest on that money. So your line of credit might be 6%, but you're going to lend it to me on a duplex deal at 13%. Is kind of the model.
That's the idea. Yep, that's exactly the model. Yes. Yep.
So you have money without having money. That is incredible. So I want to ask you this. I had a marketer on my podcast, and we talked about advertising. We talked about how to lease up apartments. He's working with developers with massive pay-per-click budgets, and they have huge advertising budgets. So my question is, how do you lease your apartments, and or not just apartments, but your units, how has that evolution changed over the years?
Yeah, so we're fortunate enough to be in a market where the vacancy rate is less than 1% in the state of New Hampshire. It's really, really tight. So there's not a ton of marketing that we really have to do. Obviously, we still got to get the word out. So when we first started, in 2000, it was putting newspaper ads in the Penny Saver and the Daily Sun of the local community that it's in. Waiting a week or two for it to get published and hope you can rent it out before your ad runs out so you don't have to rerun it. And that was a pain. And then, as more people started going to the internet to look for housing, we shifted gears. And the next big thing that worked for us was Craigslist. And that's where, 95% of our leads were coming in was through Craigslist. We also then looked at it and said, okay, well, we've got to kind of again, diversify where our lead sources are coming in from. So we started a website and had some of our leads coming in through our website. And then it kind of switched where Craigslist was kind of going away and Facebook Marketplace was the place to be. So we started advertising a ton on Facebook Marketplace. Well, then Facebook Marketplace starts shutting you down for running so many ads and things and thinks you're a scammer. So those accounts got frozen up. So now we've kind of shifted gears to Turbo Tenant. And it's really just all free advertising that we do because we are just filling turnover vacancy in a stabilized portfolio. When we're leasing up something brand new, a new development or something, then we'll go a touch further on marketing.
Yeah, I was listening to a story, and it was like a college professor or two of the business students, and they were talking like, "All right, you all have to start a brownie company. So what's going to be your edge? How are you going to do it?" And people were like, "Well, I'm going to use whole food ingredients, and I'm going to be keto, and I'm going to be gluten free," and they just went on and on and on. And at the end, the professor was like, "No, you just need to be in a starving market." Like you need to be the only hot dog stand there when the NFL game breaks out. And so there's like this saying that good apartments rent themselves. And I think that you obviously have a good product and you believe in your product and just in a great location. And you talked about going with the tide. Why swim against the tide? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You self-manage your assets. Why do you do that? Have you ever ran a third party, manage your assets? How did that go? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got a couple nightmare stories on that. So when we first started, it was, just me and my wife buying the multifamilies and got to about 60 units. And, I was doing all of the maintenance, dealing with all the tenant phone calls. My wife was dealing with all the cleaning and the bookkeeping and apartment showings. And I remember the apartment would be trashed and she'd go over there and she'd clean one little corner and set up a blanket on the floor for the kids to sit on and play their games while she was cleaning the rest of the apartment just because the rest of it was so gross. And we got to a point and I said, this is crazy. I said, we can't keep doing this. I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm just stressed right out. And so I was like, we got to figure out a different way. So about that time, I had bought a multifamily in Vermont. It was a 6-unit in Vermont, and I bought it from a guy that also was a property manager, and he said he would continue to manage that property for me. And I said, great. So, we signed up and at first it was awesome. The month end closes and then 2 weeks later we'd get a report with our check. I was like, this is fantastic. I said, will you manage our stuff for us in New Hampshire? And he said, absolutely. So we handed over 60 units for him to start managing. I was like, this is great. Now I can just focus on the development side of it. Let's buy these properties. Let's get them fixed up. We'll hand them over to this guy. He'll manage them and the checks will just come in the mail. So for the first 6 months or so, it kind of worked okay. And then after that, the checks that we were receiving started getting a little bit longer. So instead of the second week, it was a third week. And then it went to 4 weeks. So now we're in the next month almost before we're getting our rent check from that. Vacancies started slipping and he had some excuses. And then we had a check bounce and, question him on it. He's like, oh, I apologize. I forgot to transfer the funds. I'll reissue you a new check. 2 weeks goes by, finally get the check. Next month comes, it's even later. Those checks finally bounce. I'm like, something's going on here. So start looking into it. Then we have a fire, burns an apartment building down, which, he jumped right in to try to help. And so again, another month goes by dealing with all that. So now it's January and I'm like, I'm done. I got to pull the plug here. So I tell him that, that I'm all done and I want, to take back over everything. Well, come to find out, I wasn't the only landlord he was doing this to. It was like a whole ring. Everybody's rents he was depositing in one bank account. There was no separation of bank accounts. He was buying all kinds of stuff, living high on the hog, spending everybody's money. And today he's still sitting in federal prison. And I just got my restitution check yesterday for $15. And this happened back in 2006, I think, 2005, 2006. So anyway, when I took my properties back now, it was January, and we had, I think, 40% vacant. The 60% that he had in there were kind of paying. But not only that, the 2.5 months before, he embezzled all that rent money. I didn't get a dime of it on 60 apartment units. And all my tenant security deposits, he embezzled all of that, gone. Every bill, he was paying my taxes, my fuel, everything. He had sent reports saying that he paid all those things. He never paid a dime of them. So in January, I get this portfolio back. The 60% of the tenants in there, half of them sucked. They weren't paying any rent. They were trashing the place. The other units were vacant and hadn't been turned yet. All my bills hadn't been paid. My security deposits are gone. So when that happened, I said, Lynn, we are forming a management company, and I'm never letting anybody manage my properties again. This is fucking crazy. I'm not doing it. And so we retrenched, and of course, I had to negotiate with my fuel suppliers and everybody to get them all paid back. My tenant security deposit accounts, I had to rebuild and refund all those tenant security deposit accounts and restabilize the portfolio going forward. So I said, we can't just manage this on our own, but I don't trust a third party management company. So we started doing more with New England Family Housing, which turned into our management leg. And what we did is said, we'll bring in staff. So we're not the ones personally doing it. We've got a portfolio large enough now to support having some employees and some labor costs. And then we can keep an eye on it because we're in the office with this person every day. The money's getting deposited into our bank accounts. My wife has always done all the reconciliation, even though we brought in bank bookkeepers and all that stuff. She always reconciles, so we've got that check and balance. Our employees didn't have the check writing authority, so we brought it back in to stabilize it. And as a result of that real negative situation, we turned it into what has become a positive, now managing all of our stuff. And then we had a similar situation happen on the affordable stuff, because when we started developing tax credit properties, even though we were self-managing at the time, 550 units of market rate, we didn't have experience on the compliance issues that go along with the affordable stuff. So we weren't approved to self-manage. So we had hired another third-party management company. It didn't go well. There was nothing fraudulent like in my first situation, but we had extended vacancies and turnovers were slow and contracts were not negotiated, prices super high. So finally, we got approval to bring that back in house and restabilize that, and so now going forward, we just all self manage. So I know that was a long answer to your question, but boy, let me tell you, it was stressful going through those things, but they make you stronger once you overcome them.
Yeah, and as somebody who manages the 26 units that we own together, we're doing short-term rentals. So I'm turning 6 units. So I had to learn marketing and sales and property tours, scheduling, accounting, paying all these vendors. You have water, sewer, trash, electric. There is so much to it that you have to have scale to be able to do it in-house. But I could complain about it, or just like you, by diversifying yourself, it's like, I'm setting myself up. I know how to do all of this. So I'm going to be better. I'm going to learn lessons. So for somebody who is hesitant to get started because they know it's going to suck, it's only going to make you better. It's only going to give you more tools in the toolbox. Because if you're the CEO of your company and your bookkeeper has a question, well, if you can't answer it, then how are you even really going to be the leader that can answer the questions. So long-winded way of saying, I think self-managing your assets is a really good way. And I think you invested in a deal as well with someone we know. We won't say their name or anything, but their third-party property management company, didn't they have an embezzlement issue too?
They did.
It just seems like when you ask somebody seasoned, like somebody truly who has, I would say, I don't know, more than 5 years in real estate, and you ask them, they're buy and hold, like they own a property management company or they do it themselves, and that is just the reality.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's not good third-party management companies out there. I'm sure there are. And if you hire one, that's great. But that doesn't relieve you from the responsibility of making sure stuff is still getting done. You have to still have boots on the ground or somebody overseeing what's happening just to make sure it gets done. But by learning it and self-managing it, to your point, Nick, I mean, you're learning all these things right now. Those are invaluable because as you start to step back, you can plug somebody into doing some of the mundane stuff that you're doing today, but you're going to know what it takes to do that. You're going to know how long it takes to do it. You're going to know what it costs to do it. And you're going to respect the person doing that. I mean, I don't ask any of my employees to do anything that I personally wouldn't do myself. And it puts you in their position, you know, but by learning those things, that's where a lot of people turn around. There's so many people that start in this industry and then they hit these walls or they hit these challenges and they're like, you know what, this is crazy. This is not for me. And they turn around. Quick story on that. So I remember one night, it was on my birthday, and there was a sewer line that was backed up, and it was a 4-inch cast iron sewer stack that went all the way to the roof, and the third floor's toilet wasn't flushing. So I'm in a basement messing with this thing. All of a sudden, the cast iron snapped off, and it was 4 inches of shit and sewer water stacked to the roof. Completely drenched me. This is on my birthday. So Lynn comes over to see me and she's feeding me a McDonald's freaking burger, just feeding me because I couldn't touch anything because I was so friggin' gross. But I remember after just smiling and thinking, you know what? This has got to be one of those situations where people throw in a hat and say, I'm done. This doesn't work. I am out. See you later. And I remember telling myself, if I can get through this, then I'm on the other side. I know I can make it because how much worse can it get? And if you can overcome that, then you're on your way to being able to be successful. And, so dealing with those challenges, they're not bad things. They're learning experiences and, just build your character.
Yeah. Before we started this, we talked about you can't lose if you learn, right? Like you've been through it,
right?
Like, what did I read? Something stupid the other day was like, so much easier to make the second, third, and fourth pancake. It's the first one that is like, fuck, but after that, getting in scale and it sounds like you've had to shovel your way out of a lot of situations where, you get 60 units handed back to you with all these debt collections, your tenant security deposits, you have no cash, your lines are frozen. You figured out a way to shovel your way out. Is there any secret? It's just scoop by scoop, just keep going.
You gotta get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's a good one.
It's you got to be a problem solver. I mean, as these things come up, you got to keep emotion out of it and just really, dive in and say, okay, I've got this problem in front of me. There is a solution. I'm not the first one to run into a problem in this world. Other people have come up with a solution. What is that solution for this particular issue? And then you just gotta work through getting those things done.
Yeah, oh, that's so great. So cool. Let's transition to the final three. There's 3 questions that I ask all the same guests. And the first one is, what are your hobbies?
snowmobiling.
It's so funny asking you this because I know the answers to them. They're so close.
Yeah.
Doing
I
deals.
love
He's a deal
riding. I
junkie.
live
He's a
for
deal
it.
junkie. He loves looking at deals and doing deals. And I know I'm supposed to go on the final three, but this is a question that's looming on this topic. For somebody who thinks 650 units, the guy is clearly doing very well for himself. Why not just sit on the beach and drink pina coladas all day?
I don't sit well. I'd be bored out of my mind. I do have a very good work family relationship and have always balanced that very well. So, I mean, some people think, oh, to be successful, you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you got to work every weekend and, and every holiday. And in some industries, maybe that's true. And if you want to if you want to be a billionaire, you've got to add a lot of service to a lot of people. So that may be true. But that doesn't mean that you can't be successful on a bit smaller of a scale and balance those things out. So I still have time to do my passions like snowmobiling. I love woodworking. I've got a garage shop that I built. I call it my retirement playground. So I spend plenty of time in there, doing woodworking and different things. Um, but you know I don't think that if someone asks how many hours a week do I work, I can't answer that question because it's a lifestyle that I'm in. It's just part of what I do. So, retirement for me is maybe slowly kind of transitioning into um, doing more of those, extracurricular activities versus, strictly being in the office. But I don't know when that's going to be because I can't just sit on the couch or sit on the beach. I'd be bored out of my mind.
Yeah, that was great. And like it reminded me of something that whenever I'm going through something really hard, and you've mentioned a lot of hard things that you've gone through, it's something that helps me is like I tell myself it's not going to be like this forever. Like marathon runners at mile 14, they give up because they got a blister on their foot. And they give up because they think it's going to be like that forever. And the reality
Mm-hmm.
is you catch a wind, you catch a break, you catch a boom, you catch a something, a good song comes on. I mean, you get this second wind and to like keep going. So that's really good. So the next question I have is what are a few of your favorite books? Some of the books are in, and do you read or do you listen to them? Or do you read at all?
I, yeah, I used to do a lot more reading than I do now. More now, I do more listening to podcasts. Um, I like to listen to inspirational people. Historical figures that have done things in the past that I can learn from and aspire to be. I mean, there's some great people out there that have done some magnificent things. As far as books, the one that comes to mind is Trammell Crow, Master Builders. What that guy was able to create is amazing. So that'd probably be my one book recommendation.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to plug this because you sent me a list of the books. I actually made a post on LinkedIn and talked about all the books that you gave me and how I got started and who I learned from. And I kid you not, I got at least 15 to 20 messages of people asking me, hey, can you send me Kevin's list of books?
Oh,
So
no
if you
kidding.
want Kevin's list of books, DM me on LinkedIn and I will send it to you. So there you go. There's a shameless plug for you. All right, last question.
Oh,
If you could
perfect.
only do one thing in 2024, you woke up naked and you don't own any units, what would that be?
If I could,
You got stripped of your portfolio, went to zero,
yeah.
and you could do one thing to continue building another portfolio. What would it be?
Boy, the first thing I would do is go find another deal. because that leads the charge. Once you find a deal, you can figure out the financing to put it together. Most likely I'd go to a hard money lender. If I had no money, I would need to use somebody else's money, and banks will only give you 80%, 70%, depending on the bank. So yeah, I'd go find a deal that is distressed and needs some way to add appreciation to it. Then I'd go get the financing, find the contractors to do the construction, find the tenants to occupy it, and go to a bank and refinance it and rinse and repeat.
I love that. That is so good, because I tell people all the time how I got started was marketing, cold calling, and finding deals. Like, that is my contribution to the partnership right now, because I can find deals, I can structure deals. And I actually brought you a deal last year. I brought you a Taco Bell that I thought you would love. And it was a great deal for what it was. But it was a triple net lease, which, for those that don't know, is basically a Taco Bell. They pay your taxes, the insurance, and the building. So there's really nothing for you to do. And you have a 30-year lease. So your rent is fixed for the next 30 years. And I brought it to you and you're like, nope, I don't do the armchair model. I'm like, first of all, what is the armchair model? I've never heard of that, but I'm assuming that's for old people that just sit all day and don't do anything and get yacht money and a check. So I figured that one out. But second of all, I'm like, why wouldn't you want to do this deal? And he's like, Nick, if you look at my portfolio, I can raise the rent on all of my units next year. The lease on this deal is fixed for the next 30 years. There's nothing that I could do. But the moral of this story, and where I want to go with it, is not only are you a value add operator, and we got to talk about that, thankfully, but I bought that deal, or I got it under contract for $1.825 million, and I sold it for $2 million, and I never actually closed on it. So I just traded the paper, and I made a ton of money. So you don't need money to get started in real estate. You don't need 650 units to start a property management company, or you don't have to have 200 units be your first ever acquisition. So this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. So what are you looking for? How can people get in touch with you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. You can go to my website, which is newenglandfamilyhousing.com. What am I looking for? I mean, right now, our focus is on a large master plan community development we're doing in Concord. And we're looking to bring a variety of housing choice, which includes 944 residential units, which is a mix of products for sale, market rate rentals, as well as affordable housing, and 100,000 square feet of commercial retail space. So that's a project we're working on, and we're dealing with the going through the approval process now, and working with mayor and council, as well as the various boards and stuff. And the challenge is, I don't know if you've heard the term NIMBYism. Have you heard that term?
I have, but why don't you explain it for those that don't?
Yeah, so it means not in my backyard, and what that is that most developments, and every state's different. New Hampshire just happens to be a state that's tough to get approvals for new development, because everything is kind of controlled locally, not from a state level. And people in general understand that we need development, we need more housing. But then when a development is proposed, the NIMBYism is the not my backyard folks, meaning the neighbors, the people in the community that say, that's great, we need housing, but put it in a different area. Go to some other community. We don't need it here. We don't want it here. So those are usually the loudest folks that come out and talk. So when we're doing a presentation, either a formal presentation to a board or just an outreach to a chamber of commerce or some other thing, it's those are people that come out and really say their voice. But then the people that want and say, yeah, okay, that sounds good to me, they usually don't get out there and advocate for a project. Well, the problem is, then when a planning board, zoning board, city council is hearing a project, they're only hearing from these NIMBYism folks, so they think that's the sentiment of the general community, and then they vote along that way. So, my thing, the word I've been spreading is that if you support development and you support a project in your area, don't be afraid to write a letter to the city councilors or to the planning board members or whoever is in an authoritative position to make sure that that project goes forward, because they're going to hear plenty from the people that don't want it, but they don't hear enough from the people that do want it. So, that's kind of been my charge of as of late, is just really trying to get the word out there to support it. If you're in an area that needs more housing, that requires more units to be built. And for that to happen, developers need to be supported by the general community at large. So,
look, that's a great way to close it out. Look, I get it. If you called me, if there was a neighborhood and I had no problem with it, I'd be like, thumbs up, good luck. But I'm not going to your board meeting.
Right.
And I have my daughter's practice, and I have I don't have the time. But I think if you made it easy for them and said, hey, will you fill out this letter, and it's 3 clicks and a survey, send over, I'd be happy to support you. So,
yeah.
But I think it has to change. You don't see any mobile home parks anywhere being developed anywhere. I've never driven by one, and they're great affordable housing plays for people. There are good poor people in this world.
Well, and the nice thing about manufactured housing communities is that they're a non-subsidized form of affordable housing as well. So most of the workforce housing, affordable housing that you see out there has some type of government subsidy that funds the construction of that in order to keep the rents low. I mean, that's the way that process works, which is needed, and that piece is needed as well. And market rate high-end stuff is needed. But the nice thing about the mobile home parks is it's affordable living, but it's non-subsidized. It doesn't take the government to do it. It's just naturally less expensive to build and to construct and for people to live in. So big advocate of that.
So there you go. If you see a mobile home park deal, bring it to me and Kevin. We'll pay you, give you a huge fee. Now that's the end of the podcast. I appreciate you all for listening. If you would do me a huge favor, I know it's annoying, just like going to these meetings. It's so annoying, but please subscribe. It definitely helps out with the algorithm and whatnot, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Really quick, while I still have you, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to the show of Real Estate Secrets. I hope you found today's insights valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review your podcast wherever you listen to this. And last thing, I just started writing a private newsletter, basically highlighting the ups and downs of my current real estate assets. I share with you the numbers. I don't sugarcoat anything. And this is really where I can stay in touch with my investors, and would love to have you on that newsletter. So the link is in the description. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Nick Chapman. And again, thank you for listening to another episode of Real Estate Secrets. Catch you on the next one. Peace.